Hey guys, and welcome to another HitFilm tutorial. This week we've got Mike Miller back again, you may know him as Triem23 from the forums, to tell you about a highly requested feature that we added to HitFilm Pro 2017, scopes and understanding them. Over to Mike.
Hey everybody, Mike Miller here with a useful HitFilm tutorial. Now I'm sick as a dog, so after this tutorial you're probably going to want to use some hand sanitizer. Today's tutorial is about scopes, one of the new features in HitFilm Pro 2017. What are scopes, and why do we use them? Scopes are tools to visualize the color levels in your video, and the reason why we use them is that your monitor is probably incapable of displaying accurate color. Broadcast monitors used by professional colorists can cost hundreds or thousands of dollars, and they must be calibrated on a regular basis to maintain accurate color. There are several types of color spaces used to define color in video, but the only three we need to worry about are Rec 601, Rec 709, and Rec 2020. Rec 601 is used in standard definition broadcasting, Rec 709 is used in high definition broadcasting, and Rec 2020 is used in 4K broadcasting. So let's jump over into HitFilm Pro 2017 and take a look at the scopes. So here we are in HitFilm Pro 2017. And you can see on the right side of the screen, up here I have the scopes panel open. If you can't see the scopes panel, you'll want to come over here to the workplace menu, open that, and make certain that the scopes panel is selected. The scopes panel can be configured to show 1, 2, 3, or all 4 of the scope types. Right now, I'm just going to be looking at the parade and the vector scope. Scopes can also be added as an effect to any layer by coming over to the effects panel and searching for scopes. The difference between the scopes panel and adding scopes inline as an effect is that the scopes panel always shows the final output after the entire layer stack has been processed, where putting a scope in as an effect shows what the media looks like at the point at which the scope has been inserted. Other advantages of using the scopes as an effect is that the scopes effect can be rendered to your final video. The scopes effect can be limited to only read certain areas of the frame, and since the scopes effect can be configured to show only the scopes, this allows you to use the scopes themselves as a graphic element for motion graphics. There are 4 types of scopes in HitFilm Pro 2017. The first is the histogram, and if you've used Level's histogram, then you may already be somewhat familiar with it. A histogram shows general distribution of tones in a channel from left to right. The left side of the histogram represents 0 for the channel, and the right side of the histogram represents full. This is a typical HD color bar setup and would be used by a professional colorist to calibrate. And over here on the histogram, we can see that we have a big spike of black representing these areas down here, and a few smaller spikes of white representing this square, and then various other peaks representing the various luma values of each of the color bars. If I come over here and open up the controls for the histogram effect, we can see that I can select several different types of channels to read out. The default is luminance, but I can choose to read RGB, RGB parade, which displays the red, the green, and the blue as 3 separate lines. Just the red, green, or blue channels on their own. I can look at the alpha. CBCR stands for color channel blue and color channel red. These are not typically used in HitFilm unless you are using the YUV color correction effects. However, these represent more of the way that your television sees color. A television reads a luminance channel and a spectrum running from blue to yellow, and a second spectral line running from red to green. So I can also see the CBCR parade, or just the CB or CR channels. We're going to go ahead and stick with luminance for now, and then open up the options underneath. Analysis downsample just shows how much of the image the histogram is sampling. I currently have it set to quarter, which is less accurate. I could go up to full, which will be more accurate, but will render more slowly. Beneath that is the color space. I can choose between Rec 601, Rec 709, and Rec 2020. Since I'm working at 1080p, I'm just going to go ahead and leave this at Rec 709. If I come over here to the histogram in the scopes panel and click on the settings cog, it opens up the exact same controls that we just discussed in the effect. However, The effect version has this other set of controls, render to layer. And if I change this blend mode from none to normal, then our histogram is rendered on top of the viewer image. If I open up the next set of controls that open up underneath, I see I have position, top left and bottom right. These are just used to limit the area where the histogram is rendered, so I can make this larger or smaller on screen. I'm going to go ahead and turn the histogram off, but I'm going to go straight down to waveform. The waveform scope is a 2-axis display. Reading across the bottom of the waveform from left to right corresponds to the position of the image in the viewer window from left to right. The vertical axis represents the intensity of the channel that the waveform is measuring. In this case, we are still looking at luminance. And this is where a standard color bar setup becomes helpful. The important thing to measure in a waveform are minimum and maximum levels of a channel, represented by 0 and 100. Reading the waveform can be intimidating at first, but there isn't that much you need to really worry about. The important thing is to try and make certain that an image is not flatlining with too much down here at 0 or flatlining too much with pure white. The more areas of pure white or more areas of pure black you have in your image limits the amount of highlight or shadow detail that you'll be able to deal with when color grading. Let's take a look at the controls for the waveform. They're very similar to that of the histogram. The direction control was not in the histogram, and I'm going to open this up in the scope's panel to make it easier to see over here on the right. The direction merely rotates where the scope is being drawn from, and can be used by a skilled colorist to further judge the distribution of tones in the scene. Once again, we have our color space set up. I should be in Rec 709. The analysis downsample. This standard color bars toggle will be very hard to see because I'm showing standard color bars. If I come down here and turn off the image and reopen the scope settings, we can see when I toggle the standard color bar settings, these markings appearing on the waveform monitor that represent the locations of the standard color bars. Coming back over to the panel version, if I open up the clip, this can be used to limit the area of the screen that the scope is reading. So perhaps I only want to look at this gradient. I can choose to set the clipping to isolate the area being shown on the scope to just this gradient. To make that easier to see, I will come down to the render to layer options and turn that to normal. So now, as I drag that and drag that, you can see that I'm back to showing the entire image again. There's also a set of controls for comparison. Down here you'll see a comparison layer, and I have a random video clip here, which we will talk about later. But this is just to show that I now am showing side by side the waveform for the color bar layer and the waveform for the video layer underneath it. I can toggle this from side by side to overlay or set this to single scope. I'm going to go ahead and turn off comparison for now. Underneath that, I have the same options for analysis downsample, color space, and standard color bars that were in both the histogram and the scope's panel. Now if I come down to render to layer, I have more options that were not available with the histogram. I can choose to turn on and off the guidelines, which are these 0, 10, 20, 30 bars. I can turn to toggle the standard color bar markers off and on. And I can turn on the IRE labels, which are just the numbers 0, 20, 40, 60, 80, 100, etc. I can change the label scale to increase or decrease the size of the numbers. And I can set a background color and change the background alpha. By setting the background color to black and turning the background color all the way to maximum, I can choose to render only the scope to this layer. If I chose to export this composite shot, the only thing that would be rendered to the video would be this waveform display. This again allows me to use the waveform display itself as a graphic or motion graphics element if I choose. If I turn off the waveform and turn on the parade display, then we get this. I won't spend too much time talking about the parade display. It's exactly the same as the waveform, except it shows the 3 channels side by side by side. So where the waveform monitor would show a single display summing up all of the channels, the parade scope is exactly the same as the waveform, except isolating the red, the green, and the blue. All of the controls are exactly the same as they were for the waveform. So let's just go ahead and move on to our 4th and final scope, the vector scope. The vector scope is a little bit stranger to read compared to some of the others, and is probably the least important of the 4 for our purposes. The vector scope merely shows the general hue and saturation of a layer in a polar pattern. The center of the vector scope represents colors with no saturation. And you can see out here, these dots, these correspond to the color bars here in the middle of the screen. For the most part with the vector scope, all you're looking for is to make certain that your colors are not extending outside of this circle. Colors extending outside of this circle have been clipped and have lost information and detail. In the controls for the vector scope, I would like to point out this checkbox for the skin line. And what this represents is a mean distribution of skin tones. It doesn't matter whether you're Caucasian, Asian, Latino, or African. Your skin tone is going to lie somewhere on this line. So the skin line can be very handy when doing color correction for correcting incorrect white balance, for showing where the general distribution of skin tones should go. If we come over to the effect version of the vector scope, we see that the controls are exactly the same as for all of the other scopes. So how do we use scopes to help in color correcting? Well, we'll go over that in the second part of the tutorial. Thanks for watching.
Wait, don't go! Did you know that we're currently running our January sale, which means that you can save up to 15% off HitFilm and bundles and all the other stuff we have in our store? Want some killer stock? We've got everything you need, from stylish mattes and transitions to light effects like reflections and leaks. Want to expand your skill set to 3D animation? Take a look at these shots using digital actors and virtual environments from iClones users who use HitFilm alongside their iClone software. Want to add a super sexy grade to your shots? Our Magic Bullet Looks bundle comes with HitFilm Pro so that you can experiment with color correction options until you go blind. Maybe before that though. Or do you want to set yourself up with some pretty presets? Our Amplify bundle lets you create impressive titling, transitions, and video effects. Or do you just want to let off some steam with some explosive visual effects? The Action VFX bundle includes explosions, fire, and muzzle flashes. They are 4K ready and 100% real. Remember to subscribe, we put out new videos every Thursday. Bye!